So speaking of training tools and stuff, what's your opinion? So I see you use prong collars a lot, muzzles a lot, things like that. Do you use e-collars ever?
No, I don't use e-collars.
At all?
No, never used them.
Okay. Any reason
Yeah.
for that? Just because you don't
Um,
need them, or?
I'm personally a big fan of the prong collars,
Sure.
and the way that I explain them to my clients, I think everybody's uses them a little bit differently.
Sure.
I find that like my clients become very comfortable. A lot of them, they come to my class, they already know, but they still really think that maybe their dogs don't need it. And I explain to them right away, it's not a matter of even needing it. We're not putting it on your dog because your dog is more difficult than other dogs or more aggressive. It's really, there's many different ways to use it also for different dogs.
Sure.
But most of the time I'm using it for guidance. And I show them how they can actually use the prong collar with very little pressure, using like 2 little fingers to communicate with the dog and guide them by using the right fit and the right brand for that particular dog. I also don't stick with one type of collar for every dog. I definitely switch it up. That's just the way that they designed a little bit different. They send signals to the dog a little bit differently. And so you can, by using the right techniques and the approach and guiding the dog, I use it more for guidance than for correction.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll get a dog that is extremely aggressive that already has a prong collar on. So the owner will pass the dog to me already with the prong collar. But most of the time, I would never put the prong collar on the dog until I actually have them already under control.
Sure.
So I'll use, at the most, I slip lead until I get the dog to stop trying to bite. And then I slowly introduce them to the prong collar because I like to get the dog conditioned to the prong collar and comfortable with the prong collar. And I explain it to my clients all the time. The prong collar is going to, create restrictions. So the dog is going to feel restricted, and some dogs don't like that because they're used to a harness all the time. So now they feel something that does get their attention. It sends them a lot of signal. With a little bit of pressure, when it tightens around the dog's neck, it's going to send signal. It's not pain. For dogs that calm, especially, they're not forcing against trying to bite or anything. They're going to respond very easily to the prong collar with very little pressure. So you're using it more as a guidance tool than a corrective tool. And I really feel like it's also the dog, it builds engagement. Because you're constantly getting the dog's attention because it sends them signal. You're reinforcing commands like sit, for them to stop. You're able to reinforce the heel. You're able to reinforce turns and many different things. But you're constantly keeping the dog following directions from the leash. Therefore, it builds more engagement because the dog gets conditioned to always taking directions from the leash. So the owners, my clients, they see it all the time, putting the prong collar. So it becomes something that they definitely are really interested in using. And then the e-collars, it's not that I'm against them. I know trainers that use them. I just don't get the same. It's much easier to be confusing to the dog.
Sure.
Unless you really, really know what you're doing.
It's much less personal,
Yeah, I think the prong collar is more personal. It's like the prong collar is more, the dog knows it's coming from me.
Yep.
Versus the e-collar, I know you can condition the dog to know that as well.
Sure.
But also, there's many different reasons too. Like I, get really good results with the tools that I use. I wouldn't want to switch that. And then I feel like with the prong collar, it's unless you have a long time to work with the dog and the client to get them, on the same page with how the collar works and getting the dog conditioned to them. I think it takes more time to get the dog conditioned to it.
Yeah.
On average, like for most dogs, than a prong collar. I wouldn't have enough time with the style of classes that I do.
Yeah.
Number one. And then, like I said, just much easier to confuse the dog. And I feel a lot of dogs, they can be under control really quickly sometimes with the e-collar, but it's more because they are scared of the e-collar.
Sure.
At first, over time, of course, I know they can get conditioned to that. And it really takes someone who takes the time to use it properly to communicate with the dog, again, just similar to the prong collar.
Yeah.
As a guiding tool for the dog. But
that makes sense.
I feel like the owners would probably be able to, some of my clients, they probably would be able to get the dog under control faster with the e-collar, with some of the severe cases that I work with. But they would have no control over the dog without it. And it would be really confusing for them to use both as well.
Yeah.
So I tell them, I don't really use them, not against them. Now, there's a situation where if a client came to me and they had a very high-strung dog, maybe they have disabilities. They don't, they cannot really use their hands really well, and they really need something to just be able to control the dog better. I probably would recommend them to go to a trainer who specializes in that.
Sure.
So I would help them get the dog under control. I would do a lot of training with them, and then they can go to get specifically trained for the e-collar.
Yeah.
I just choose not to even get involved with it, because also, back then there was a lot of speculations where like I use e-collars to control this dog. And even with the prong collar, my clients know I don't really use the prong collar to get the dog under control.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you watch my videos, the dogs that have the prong collar on when they're aggressive, they already had the prong collar on.
Yeah.
Every other dog, they start without it, and then I put the prong collar after I have them under control.
Yeah.
So it's not the prong collar that's making the dog submit to me at all.
Sure.
Because that would be traumatizing to the dog if they're not used to having the prong collar on. And unfortunately, I do have some clients that I tell them don't switch anything that you're using on your dog until after I get there.
Yeah.
And sometimes they put the prong collar like the day of the group training.
Yeah.
And also you can definitely see a dog that's more stressed out with it, or even frustrated because they just slapped the prong collar on. Yeah. And sometimes I don't know that, I have a class, I kind of have to go dog by dog pretty fast. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And, I have a lot of respect for, like you were just saying, like if you do see somebody who you think would be a good fit for, referring them out to somebody who does e-collar training and stuff, but that makes complete sense to me. Yeah, I remember way back when that first off-leash German Shepherd video came out, I think one of the big things everybody was saying was, oh, well, he uses e-collars to control these dogs. And it's funny that like you've never even used them.
It really stemmed down from a couple of things. One is that all those dogs before I got them already all full grown. There was one dog that I got as a puppy out of that whole pack. So every other dog had no life experience at all. They came from living in kennels for the first 2-3 years before I ever got them. And they had no drive. They were more laid back because of that. They were limited to just being in a kennel and literally just that. And so when I did a lot of the training with them and taught them to be obedient, they were way more submissive, displayed a lot more submissive body language. That was one huge thing. And then the other thing was that they had collars that were like dried up and they were like sticking out a little bit.
Yeah.
And they would call them antennas, and that was like an antenna or things like that. And then I guess the other thing that I was gonna say is I'm not against e-collars. I don't really use them. Like all my clients would know, I have never put a prong collar on any of the dogs I work with. But even though I'm not against them, I also now I'm like, if I really wanted to use it, I wouldn't care about what people say.
Sure.
Because I would have to have a reason to use it. I would have to be able to justify,
yeah,
using it. And again, it's not that I'm against them, but the tools that I use work really well for me. That's why I don't use it. But also back then I didn't want to give people that.
Yeah. Because
it's, even again, what I said with the prong collar, people know that it's not just as simple as slapping a prong collar on your dog to have them behaving. Like more than half of my clients have been using the prong collar already before they come to me. And the dogs are either pulling on it or they're afraid of the prong collar, because you have to have the right type of prong collar, the right fitting of the prong collar, and then using it, properly with the right techniques to get the best results.
Yeah.
So we know that, but I don't want just uneducated people commenting it's because they have e-collar. Anyone can do that with an e-collar, and it's not true.
Sure.
People cannot just walk their dogs off leash, especially in a pack, just because they put an e-collar on the dog.
Yeah.
It still takes a lot more than that. Which again, same thing with the prong collar. The dogs don't behave just because they have a prong collar. Of course, it makes it faster. Of course, it's a great tool for communication. Why would I not use it? But it's not for the reasons that people think. That the dog is just intimidated by it and you're hurting them. We know it doesn't work like that, and my clients know it doesn't work like that. But with the e-collar, I just didn't want to give people that, and because it's not true, and I don't want people believing something that's not true, and then feeling like they either gonna just slap up e-collar on their dog, number one, or they're gonna not get help because they think the trainers are just putting e-collar, and it's just as simple as that. And they can do it at home, when it's not like that at all.
Yeah, definitely. As somebody who uses primarily prong collars, one of the common things we'll see is dogs come in that have been on prong collars whatever their whole life, or have been to trainers who have done prong collar work, and the dog just like gets seemingly like calloused up to it, like they just don't care about the sensation, stuff like that. What are some common mistakes you see that people make that inhibit the long-term success with the prong collar?
Well, definitely. I think the two biggest things is using oversized collars, both in the sense of the links being very bulky.
Yeah.
Which the sensation. Of course, you want the tips to be rounded, but you want it to be a little bit thinner as well, because you want that sensation around the neck.
Sure.
You want it to close and feel the not puncturing, but literally sensation.
Yeah.
And when it's bulky and heavy, or especially if you use those plastic,
the star mark
covers
collars
at the tips, they will also take away from the sensation. And then if it's too loose, like too oversized on the dog, hanging low on the neck, which means the dog is just going to get too comfortable with leaning against it. And over time, again, the prong collar is another more proof that it doesn't really hurt once,
sure,
if you have the right collar for your dog. But in this sense, it's not going to hurt, but if you're not yanking really hard on your dog, it's also not going to get their attention either. Yeah. And you don't want to yank hard on your dog. And most people don't, so they just slap it on the dog, and it's just sitting there, and the dog gets comfortable with pulling against it. So over time, it's like they don't really see the prong collar as something that they have to respect. Now, it can almost trick the dog into feeling like they have to respect it, because when you first put it onto a new dog, and you have the right size and the right type of prong collar and everything, that sensation is going to deliver a message to your dog, like, I should slow down, And because they slow down and you release the tension, they actually get conditioned to like, oh, a little bit of pressure, I just have to do it is stop, and that goes away. So they get conditioned to actually not forcing themselves against the prong collar.
Yeah.
So I think the key is to not get them too comfortable with a collar.
Yeah.
By not using techniques of like a little bit of a tug on the leash, even though it's gentle, you still want to do a little bit of that, just to, when they feel it, it gets their attention, you reward them for that. It builds more engagement. The dog, there's a couple of things, of course, they learn to avoid that, because when they're pulling, there's that quick little tug on the leash. Number two, when they stop, they look at you and they feel accomplished as well, because they know if they're walking right next to you and they're not pulling against the leash, that's the best place to be. You're rewarding them. You're calm. It doesn't have to be with treats or anything. You can, but just in general, your body language and the dog knows you're happy. They feel accomplished, and so it helps build engagement. And that's I would say that's the biggest mistake.
Yeah.